Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. We're going to talk about, in the context of the economy, where it's headed, how it's going to affect your ability to earn income, to protect your income, to protect your hard-earned money, your savings, etc. And this is also, it turned into a bit of a lengthy thing. So I probably won't go into as much detail on each slide as maybe I normally do. But of course, we can always go back later. But I kind of wanted to give an overview of sort of, where we are with AI, where we are now, where we're headed, on what timeline, an estimate, and then how this sort of shifting work right now and how it's shifting skills that are necessary in the world, and then ending with some practical strategies for what you could actually do to be more competitive, or more, not even competitive. Competitive isn't the right word, but to have an advantage in the world, I guess, in a way. This was interesting. This is how I feel like we're living through a sci-fi movie or a sci-fi novel right now. But this was a scientific paper that was published maybe a month ago. The planetary phase shift as a new systems framework to navigate the evolutionary transformation of human civilization. That's where we're going. I was also listening to I guess a YouTube video where he pretty much said, this is his quote: "The world as you know it is over, completely done. Not about to be over, it's over." And he doesn't mean that we're all dying. He just means what we knew as the world is really pretty much in the past, and we are now moving into just a very different world that we don't really know, we don't understand, we kind of need to adapt to. So AI has been around for a while, right? It's been we've been talking about AI since the mid 1900s, even, but why it's coming to a point right now. So right now, we had AI back in, the computer era, the internet era, right? You had computers starting to learn from data, blah, blah, blah. Then you had AI kind of dominating certain things like chess and Go. There's a documentary about how when they figured out that AI could beat a human at Go, which is apparently one of the most complicated games ever. And that they get better at, protein folding and all that thing. So then ChatGPT came out in 2022, 2023-ish. I think it was the end of 2022. So that arrives, but it was then available to the masses, whereas before it was really only available to software engineers and computer people, So that's why it started to accelerate pretty exponentially. And where are we with this shift? So we'll just watch the intro here.
Hello, frogs. Yeah. I am a frog too. I have been for quite a bit of time. I think recently I started to try to jump out of the water, at least to tell you that the water is boiling. Because like that boring proverb we've always heard, the idea that the frog, when you put it in cold water and, heat the water slowly, the frog doesn't notice, and then eventually the frog gets boiled alive. I have to admit, this hit me really, really strongly by 2020. When you look back from 2020, you realize there were so many signs that we were going to get a very big pandemic that is going to affect us. If you look back at history, 1920 was around the same time. We've had swine flu and bird flu and all of the other things, SARS and so on before that. And yet, somehow, no one said, hey, by the way, should we be cautious about a possible pandemic? And then when COVID started, you know, first patient, nobody's paying attention. 20 patients, nobody cares. 100 patients, 1,000 patients. It was really when we started to get to 1 million that suddenly everyone was like, the water's boiling. We're all gonna die. Interesting. You seem to, I don't blame anyone for this. I've recently been putting a lot of attention in understanding the economic and geopolitical situation of the world. And until I started to, I thought it was chill. It was okay. Nothing was, and then you start to put your head into it. I think what happens is for each and every one of us, we have limited capacity as humans. Like we can focus on 10 topics, right? 15, and if AI is not one of them, it doesn't really exist to us, okay? Now, I'm here to tell you, this is it. The world as you know it is over, completely done, okay? It's not about to be over, it's over, right? And so I'd openly say, you probably have a year, not to live, you're gonna live more than a year, I hope, but you know, you probably have a year to react, okay? And don't blame me, because honestly, I'm never coming back to speak to you. Next year, you're probably gonna invite my avatar, right? So, and I promise you that's the truth. Before I came here yesterday, just for the fun of it, I asked Gemini and ChatGPT, I said, give me a 35-minute speech on AI and read me minutes 2 to 4. Yeah, it did sound a bit like a politician, but it made a speech, right? And it's quite interesting how we ignore that, because with something like ChatGPT 4.0, which came out this week,
he goes long. I recommend watching his entire thing if you are interested in this topic. But it's, you know, it's like 30 minutes long, so we're not gonna watch it today. But yeah, essentially he's saying we're the frog. We're like the frogs that are living in this AI world, and we're not really paying attention to it, and it's gonna like happen like this. Also, interestingly, this talk was given a year ago. So he said, you have a year, and it's like pretty much now feels like that point where like, yeah, we had the year. The year is over, and now we're here. Another analogy that somebody used is like, it's like a popcorn moment. Like, you've got the popcorn kernel, it's, you know, it gets heated up, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, right? But it was getting heated up that entire time. It just didn't really look like anything was really happening, right? Until it hits that point of no return. I kind of like that analogy better, to be honest. So we're basically sort of like at this point of no return, essentially. We're deep in it. Yeah, and if you're not kind of paying attention, yeah, you could pretty much ignore that AI is even happening if you just live in your bubble. But guarantee you won't be able to ignore it for a whole lot longer. All right, so you probably heard of like artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence, maybe the singularity. I don't know. Have you guys heard of these terms? It kind of goes like artificial general intelligence is first. That's where, you know, the systems are kind of meeting human intelligence. And there are a lot of people out, I mean, we'll never know exactly when you hit that point, right? Because there's not like an exact way to measure that. But for me personally, I've kind of measured it as like, well, if it has an IQ higher than me, then like I would say maybe that's enough. And the AIs do have IQs of like Einstein now. So most of it is sort of smarter than humans. Of course, it's not human. It's just, it's intelligent, like a intelligent human. Artificial super intelligence, however, that's where that's where they're saying like, okay, AI is now smarter than all humans on the world combined. They can do anything that humans can do, creativity, wisdom, social skills, even have emotions. Like that's, you know, not where we are, right? That's way down the line. But then in the middle, there's this point called like the singularity, which is talked about as this sort of hypothetical point where you're sort of on this runaway train now of, okay, well, the AI has kind of gotten to this point where there's no stopping it, and we actually don't have any idea what our world will look like after that point, because it's now smarter than us, so much more intelligent, and it's going to start transforming our civilization. You know, pair that first slide of like, well, I mean, how can you predict it if we're not smart enough to predict, right? So the AI could end up just changing our world in ways that we absolutely have no idea. So that's sort of like the singularity. And there's, I don't know, I've heard like various points on this. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard different ones, but I'm generally hearing that like they're expecting the singularity around like 2030. So like less than 5 years from now. This guy, Ray Kurzweil, he gave a TED talk last year, about a year ago, actually. He's been studying, researching AI. I mean, he's old. Look at him. He's been studying, researching AI since like the 50s. And he would like tell people, like, they'd be like, oh, what do you study? And he's like, artificial intelligence. And they're like, what's that? You know, so like he's kind of been sort of a pioneer in this, and he's been able to track it so well that he has a really good grasp of like the timeline of when things are going to happen. And so his opinion, I think, matters. All right, so what does this all mean? So like we're currently in this very scarcity based economy and world right now, right? Everybody is competing for scarce resources. There's never enough. There's never enough money. There's never enough gas for the car. There's never enough housing. Like, there's never enough, right? So there's two futures that are kind of emerging. One is one that's even more scarce, and one that's a complete abundance society. So we'll start with the cautious view, which is basically people saying, oh, AI is overhyped. Like, people are just talking it up. You know, it's going to advance a lot more slowly than people think. And that it's only going to contribute to like a small, modest GDP growth. And that the owners of AI, you know, like OpenAI and Meta and Microsoft, that they will be the ones to benefit from the AI gains, like the elite few, and that it will just continue to widen the wealth inequality, and that there will be widening skills gap. So some people will understand it, some people won't, and there'll be even more inequality and more scarcity. So there's a couple of people here who are, you know, kind of on that train. There's another viewpoint on the polar opposite extreme of that, which is this optimistic view, which is AI is actually way underhyped, and that AI will then lead to like extreme productivity booms, GDP growth of like 10% per year, and it will be this age of abundance, right? And we can't even imagine it because we don't live in, that's not the world that we've lived in, right? So if you think about it, what is AI kind of trending the cost of certain things down? So, you know, technology always gets cheaper and cheaper because technology gets better. And as technology gets better, the cost of it, those goods go down. So the cost of a computer used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now you can get one for like $500, right? So technologically, those things will get cheaper. Then you have renewable energy is getting really cheap. So you could actually have abundant or almost free energy, which we can't even imagine. You would have almost free. I mean, right now, I mean, if you think about it, $20 a month to have like someone in your pocket who can tell you anything at any time, that's a huge advantage. That's intelligence that you've never had before, and you would have had to pay a lot of money for that intelligence. So intelligence is almost near free now. We're also seeing things like marketing, graphic design, like things that AI can do now that basically it can just do it for free. So a lot of things are actually getting very cheap. So that's sort of the argument for this world of abundance, where AI basically leads to a society where our economy is so productive that we have a surplus of money, a surplus of goods and services that basically cost nothing. And in that case, but we may not have jobs. And so then we would need universal basic income because there's no jobs and we have a plentiful amount of money, so why not? Some other people have actually gone as far to say that we may even need universal high income, not even a universal basic income, a universal high income, because we will have so much money that there will be such abundance that everybody will be like living like kings, like, yeah. This is also not like super far future, like it's not super far in the future. If you go to world.org, there's more information about Sam Altman actually has a completely separate company from OpenAI, where he's working. He basically believes, he is of this abundance camp, and he believes that AI is going to make everything so abundant that they're going to need to basically redistribute the wealth to the rest of the world. And he has a plan for how to do that at world.org. And this week, actually, they announced in San Francisco the launch of their app, their coin, which they're using the blockchain as the way to distribute the wealth, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I don't know that much about it, but it's kind of heading that way. So then it's kind of like, well, what the hell do humans even do? And like, how do we find purpose and meaning? And you start going down that path, which is just a very different path. One that, I think the mindset shift around that of like, if everything does become cheap, what do we value? What do we want to pay money for? Why do we even have money then at that point, right? So we'll see. Couple clips here.
And I think part of that is, number one, we're seeing massive actual revenue and impact without that much adoption, right? So Azure's last quarter, they did like $28 billion in the quarter. I think they said 10 to 15% of that lift or growth was from AI products. So that would be what, amazing. $2.5 billion or something.
Amazing.
Quarterly, right? Amazing.
But that's the infrastructure people are building on. So
sure.
People are paying them. So are they making, are the things on top of it profitable, or are those things just raising money and building on it?
Well, some things on top of it are doing extremely well, right? Midjourney is rumored to be doing extremely well financially. Yep. There's a variety of companies that are scaling very rapidly, but it's very early days, right? ChatGPT came out less than 2 years ago. And that was a starting gun for a lot of people to realize.
GPT-3 was only 2 years, huh? Yeah, it's amazing.
ChatGPT. GPT-4 came out 18 months ago. Okay. GPT-3 came out in, I can't remember if it was 21 or...
Yeah, this feels more like about this 3 years, I think.
20 or something, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, years. That makes
three,
more sense.
3, you could kind of see things kind of working, but 3.5, 4 was when you really saw the sea change in terms of capabilities, and then ChatGPT got slapped on top of that as sort of a post-training thing.
So he's in the, the investor world. And then this is Eric Schmidt. He's the ex-CEO of Google. And this was a talk that he gave recently, this week.
I call this, by the way, the San Francisco consensus, because everyone who believes this is in San Francisco. It may be the water. What happens when every single one of us has the equivalent of the smartest human on every problem in our pocket? But the reason I want to make the point here is that in the next year or two, this foundation is being locked in, and we're not going to stop it. gets much more interesting after that. Because remember, the computers are now doing self-improvement. They're learning how to plan, and they don't have to listen to us anymore. We call that superintelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence. And this is the theory that there will be computers that are smarter than the sum of humans. The San Francisco consensus is this occurs within 6 years, just based on scaling. This path is not understood in our society. There's no language for what happens with the arrival of this. That's why it's underhyped. People do not understand what happens when you have intelligence at this level, which is largely free.
So the first thing that we're hearing about is that some jobs are going away. This happens with like every technology, right? But there are some jobs in some fields that are going to be much more vulnerable than others. You know, you've got the stuff that basically AI can do easily, like the customer service, creating content, data entry, admin work, VA stuff, and then actually on the physical side, driving and transportation, which is one of the largest, I don't know, largest jobs, largest portion of employment is, you know, truck drivers and taxi cab drivers and things like that. That job is probably also going away because AI will be driving cars. They already started, I think in Austin, they just started this week or last week, a pilot where the Tesla, there's, I guess, robo-taxis, Tesla robo-taxis that are, they don't even have steering wheels. They're just taxis that drive themselves around town, and it's live and it's been released in Austin. And they're expecting maybe in a month or two to sort of expand that. Yeah, so, you know, Tesla's plan essentially is to remove the occupation of driving. And then there's the like white collar jobs in the middle that is mostly what we've been doing, right? It's like computer work. You know, you're sitting at a computer, maybe you're doing editing, analysis, research. This was software engineers, programmers, right? It's changing. So like, we may not need to, like, this is, I think that we're actually in the, I think we're in the group that AI is going to change how we work and what type of work we do the most, because we'll have to start shifting what we do and move around our workflows and things like that. And then you also kind of already see this in some companies have kind of already started shifting their org charts around. So companies have been organized by structure, like function, right? You've got your marketing team, your engineering team, your finance team, you know, and so each function is a team that works, you know. Well, now you have people that can kind of do a little bit of everything. Like, you know, I can do this, I can do marketing, I can do finance, I can do programming, because now I can code with AI. So now you have people that actually have access to a lot of those skills. So these companies are reorganizing around projects and like products, you know, so within a company. So if you're working on a specific product within that company, then you're all going to be like in one team, all kind of using all of these things rather than just a finance team. You know, you've got your product team. And then the ones that are really more resilient are the physical tasks, you know, like massage therapy, creative direction, some therapy. I mean, like, you know, therapy that requires real like hands-on work, but also therapy is actually the #1 use of AI for the general public right now. I think that was a study that Harvard Business Review just put out. So people are using it even for therapy. The therapists are having a little bit of, yeah, therapists don't really like that. And there are some issues with that. I mean, some people really should be, seeing a real human, because it's not a replacement for a human. But the emotional labor, so caring for the elderly, caring for, nurses, like nursing isn't really disappearing anytime soon, although maybe in the future it will, but not right now. And then the decision making, like the strategy, like who's going to manage the AIs? Somebody has to tell the AI what to do. Somebody has to review the output that the AI gets and say, okay, I'm looking at that. This is what's important, kind of like how I put this presentation together. I ask AI for a lot of the input. I'll ask it questions. It gives me resources, and then I say, okay, well, that one's interesting. That one's not interesting. This is interesting. Ultimately, I'm the one who decides what's important to talk about, right? So as far as work goes, I think there's also a lot of people who are saying, oh, well, it's not really disrupting work. Like nothing's going to change all that quickly. But again, it's kind of like the popcorn and the boiling frog thing. It's what economists call gradually, then suddenly. So it's kind of happening gradually right now, but in the very near future, it's going to be happening suddenly, very suddenly, that this is all going to be what we know as work is going to change overnight. And I would argue it already is. In a lot of industries, it already is changing overnight. I don't know what marketing departments are even like how they're responding to the changes, but I can't imagine how disruptive that must be for them. Yeah, so, and then these are a couple of tweets that I saw that were I just thought these were interesting tweets about how work is kind of shifting, or what jobs are being affected. And these are all sort of guesses, like at the end of the day, because we really have no idea. We can kind of guess like what's being affected like right now, this month, this year, but honestly beyond that is kind of a guess. I will say, something that I kind of noticed when doing this research is like, oh, well, what are people saying are the jobs that are going to be vulnerable versus the ones that are going to be obsolete? And there is not consensus on that. Like, there are some people that are like, oh yeah, you can't replace therapists, and yet other people are like, well, they're being replaced. So things like that. And I think some of the things that they think are vulnerable may not be vulnerable yet, but maybe will be in the future. So we don't really know. I would go back and watch Mo Gadot's talk that I started to show. He was the one who was talking about the boiling frogs. He talks a lot about how it's really important how we as humans decide to use AI, because it's not AI that's gonna disrupt us. It's the humans who are using AI that could put this down a bad path, right? So we need to use AI the way that we think it should be used, rather than how it can be used. But he goes into a lot more detail about that, and I thought his presentation was really well done, and was pretty much the inspiration for this presentation. So I do recommend that. And then like, okay, what kind of jobs? Jobs are going away, but every time there's been a technological revolution, it has reduced jobs, but then it creates completely new types of work, right? So one of the examples is, I don't know, 200 years ago, like 80% of the population were farmers. And then we have the Industrial Revolution, and they're like, oh my God, it's going to get rid of all the work. What the hell are we going to do now? Or nobody's going to have jobs. Nobody's going to have work to do. And that's just not at all the case. That's not what happens. So now we have less than 2% of the US are farmers, but we all still work, most of us. And so work is just going to look different. New jobs will be created. The World Economic Forum projected that 85 million jobs might be displaced by 2025, which is this year. but that 97 new ones would emerge. So it would actually create more jobs than it displaces. I'm not exactly sure how they came to those numbers, but I know it's intriguing. And these are just a couple of examples of like a potential new job that might be coming out. You see a lot of people trying to understand how to use AI. That seems to be a huge market. There's AI consultants, there's companies that will do AI audits to like implement sort of, I guess, like consultancy to improve and AIify your company to make it more efficient. And then there's people who are really working on AI ethics and governance and how are we going to, do this? And then, yeah. So there's a lot of potential opportunities out there as well. So then, like, how is this actually changing the nature of work? Like what we know as work. We have typically produced content, right? We're writing blog posts, like that was our work, or we're writing reports, or we're putting spreadsheets together, or we're writing, a lot of writing. I mean, a lot of work was writing. I was going to say, as customer support, I'm writing emails, or I'm putting together a help article or something like that, right? So a lot of that, we're not going to be on the producing side, we're going to be on the directing side. So a lot more quality control and creative direction. And then maybe moving from specialization to integration. So maybe you specialized in finance, right? But now you're moving into, well, I'm not just an expert in one domain. Now I have to work cross-functionally, and I might be working on this project. And so I need to know a little bit about everything in the company. And then what about our schedules? So it's kind of already we're already shifting from being in the office to being remote. A lot more people are, one stat was that 50% of Americans are contingent workers, meaning they're like gig workers. It's a huge chunk of the economy, either through, being entrepreneurs, running their own business, maybe they're Uber drivers, they're Airbnb hosts, like there's something, but they're not working for, just Google. They're not working for Apple. So that kind of shifts the way we work, as in like who sets your schedule. Like if 50% of Americans are also working whenever they want, then you're moving more from this 9-to-5 fixed schedule type of work to more flexible work patterns, work when you want to. And also, do you need to work 9 to 5? Because if your work becomes more direction and creativity and strategy, you may need to shift your work schedule from one that's very rigid to one that flows with the energy, like flows with your creativity. And this is kind of how I work. Like I have absolutely no schedule whatsoever. But if I get like a moment of inspiration, or I feel like I'm just feel really energetic right now, well, then that's when I put energy into what I'm doing, right? But I'm not just sitting here saying, I wake up in the morning and I'm going to do work for, 8 hours. Like we don't do that anymore. So we could see more shifts in that as the type of work changes. And then from more like maybe solo work to collaborative work, where we kind of like worked in a silo. I had my task, I just did my job, and I didn't really need to work with anybody else. But now again, if AI is doing that, they are the ones working in the silos. Well, now we have to do more of the collaborating with humans to figure out how to get the AIs to do what we want them to do. So there's not a lot of room for us to just be like working in silos, I guess, like that. So those are just some thoughts, some ideas. Obviously, it could turn out to look completely differently. But then as far as adoptions goes, there was a stat that 94% of employees and 99% of C-level execs do have some level of familiarity with generative AI, but of that, only like 10 to 15% were actually using AI to handle more than a third of their workload. So it's still early. It's not completely adopted, but people know about it, and it's, you know, gradually then subtly going to happen. And I shared this before, but Toby is the CEO of Shopify, and he was one of the first CEOs to come out and say it is now required to use AI. It's like AI first before we hire any other humans. But his memo went, you know, in more detail than that as well. It was really like, you need to be learning this. This is not, it is not optional for you to not use AI in your workday. And so that's a huge shift, right? And it's hard to sort of expect people to just jump in. Like, it's like everybody, all of the employees need to like completely reskill or upskill. And since he posted that, I've seen a couple of other companies post similar things about not hiring unless you can't have an AI do it, and more support and training for employees to do AI and like encouragement. It tends to be more of the startups and the, you know, the more of the tech companies that seem to be on that trend, while the, you know, dinosaur companies, you know, maybe aren't on that train. I mean, that's typical, but they are the early adopters of that. And so it is interesting to see how they might adopt work, and then maybe see how the rest of us will be adopting as well. So then there's this huge gap between skills, like, and skills that people have now are really not that useful anymore. And so a lot of people are going to have to find new work. They're going to have to reskill. Some of them, like language translation. I think Toby said one of the biggest things at Shopify that AI has done is it's completely replaced their language translation. So they don't really have language translators anymore. And we don't need to memorize information. Our entire education system is educating Americans on basically memorizing. Like, that's what we've been taught. Memorize this and then repeat it for a test. Well, we don't need, that's not a skill that we need anymore because we have access to that information whenever we want. So it's not rote memorization that's important. It's going to be more like, well, you need to know things because you need to have critical thinking skills. And to have critical thinking skills, you do need to understand history and sociology and anthropology, right? But not rote memorization. So it's going to be more about, generating novel ideas and, synthesizing cross-functionally, or, critically evaluating what the AI is telling us, or, having ethical reasoning, creative direction, emotional intelligence, and empathy. Those are the skills that are going to be way more important. And I would say, this is my personal opinion, I'd say most of our country is quite lacking in most of those skills. So we have a lot of catching up to do. Yeah. So I don't know if economists call this a barbell effect, but I actually thought of it as a barbell effect of like, how do you upskill? How do you think about upskilling? Well, if you think about a barbell, what are the two sides of upskilling? Well, one is upskilling your technical AI skills, understanding what it is, how to use it, blah, blah, blah. But then upskilling your human skills, getting better at communication, empathy, listening, We have a problem with Gen Z right now because they don't know how to talk on the phone to a human, and they don't know how to smile at a stranger on the street. I mean, like, these problems. Yeah, guys, the Gen Z in my neighborhood are like, they're like scared of humans. If I get too close, they like, oh God, don't get near me. This is another great interview that just came out with the Diary of a CEO. He is a really brilliant podcaster, and he interviewed Morgan Housel. Morgan Housel wrote The Psychology of Money, which is a fantastic book as well. But he got on here, and he was actually interviewing him about, Morgan Housel's new book, which I can't wait to read. It's How to Spend Money, which I think is just really telling of, like, if we're moving into an abundant world, we do actually need to figure out how to spend money. We don't know how to spend wisely or aligned with our values, but I digress. So this was his comment about AI.
The other protagonist of change at the moment is artificial intelligence. And I've spent a lot of lonely, quiet hours in my room thinking about the impact it's going to have and trying to develop my own thesis and what it means as a creator, as a podcaster, as an investor. And I wanted to understand how significant you think artificial intelligence is, and if it at all impacts your thesis around money and wealth and investing and saving.
I'm not even remotely an expert in AI, but as someone who's looked at like the history of technology, one thing that sticks out clear as day when you study technology, when in hindsight, when you're looking at a new technology that went on to change the world, the computer, the car, the airplane, those things, when like this was a turning point in civilization. If you go back and look at what the optimists were saying at the time, they massively underestimated it. And that's what the optimists were saying. Forget the pessimists on it. So go back to the 1920s and see, what were the optimists saying about the airplane? They were underestimating it by 100-fold. What did the optimists say about the car? They underestimated by 100-fold. Computers, the same. And the Wright brothers themselves came up with the first airplane in the United States. The Wright brothers themselves primarily marketed their plane to the US Army, because they did not really foresee much use for an airplane outside of the military. They knew you could strap a machine gun on it, and the Army might like that. But did the Wright brothers foresee Delta Airlines, like an Emirates, an A380? Like, not in a million years. And so I think it's true that in a lot of things in life, I think it was Peter Thiel who said this. He was like, when things are going wrong, you underestimate how bad they're going to get. But when things are going right, you underestimate how big it's going to be. I may have butchered that quote, but it's something like that. And it's clear that AI is right. And so it's almost certainly the case that even the optimists, even the Sam Altman optimists, are underestimating where it will go. And a lot of the reason for that is because new technologies is not what the inventor, whoever that might be, built. It's what other people go on to manipulate it as. And that's why the Wright brothers came up with a plane, and now we have the A380. Like, it's other people manipulating things along the way to create something just gigantic.
One perfect example of that with AI is OpenAI have created this large language model which can do all these wonderful things, but then people are using that same technology to create AI agents, which are equally astonishing. I spent the last couple of weeks using AI agents to build some software. I'm someone that has no ability to code at all, but I can sit in my bedroom and speak to this agent and tell it to build me a new to-do list or a new website for the podcast that tracks who's been on the show and follows them in the news. Like, I can tell it to do anything. And for what's probably costing me $1 a day, it's building me software now. And we're just at the start of that exponential curve. So if we now think that these large language models are going to be able to create things, create digital things, things on the internet, this podcast is on the internet. We know that it can create podcasts. We know it can create videos, images, software. I look at that and go, you play this forward. And if I apply your optimism analogy, your optimism lens to it, where I go, we're underestimating this curve. It's really hard to see how this isn't tremendously disruptive in the long term.
Not even in the long term, but in the short term. I'll give you one example. You talked about coding there. We're doing a little remodel on our house right now. And one of the things you can do is take a real picture of a room, upload it in. We use ChatGPT for this and said, hey, paint it this color, remove this wall, put this in. It is better than any designer will be able to do it. And it's right there, boom, in front of you.
Seconds.
And you can multiply that story by 10,000 different versions of that stories for 10,000 different jobs. I'd see it as a writer, where I don't use it to write. I write all my own words, but one thing that I've played around with, I don't really use this as that much of a tool, but just more of an experiment of like, I'll upload a chapter from a book that I wrote and say, hey, give me some feedback on this. And it wasn't that good a year ago. It's pretty good today. It's pretty good. So if you're looking for like a writing assistant, it's amazing. Now, the downside of that is everyone knows, like the high schoolers and the college students who use it to write the essay, just write the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's probably not great. But if you're using it as a helper, it's probably the best writing teacher that's out there. So right there, in my just like tiny little world of, I really don't know anything about AI, but interior designer, editor, go on down the list of jobs that like literally 3 months ago, I would have been like, oh, that's a very valuable job. And all of a sudden you look at this tool for $1 a day, as you said, you're like, it's pretty good.
What does history tell us about how this shakes out? Like when these industrial revolutions come along, or the technological revolutions, where does the value accrue? And how do I participate in that value?
I guess one good analogy from right here, and it's probably not as powerful as what we're dealing with right now, but the closest is probably, it wasn't that long ago, the late 1800s, that 80% of Americans were farmers. That's what it was. And then the Industrial Revolution and the tractor and the combine came along, and all of a sudden it was like, we don't need that many farmers doing this. What people used to do with shovels and rakes can now be done with a tractor. And a lot of those people found themselves out of work. And for them, it was very disruptive, but they also, the farm laborer found himself pretty easy to go into the factory, because they were working on, they were good at working with their hands and whatnot. And so to go from that into the factory was not an easy transition, but it was a transition they could make. Now, do you have that same transition did not take place from manufacturing to technology. The auto worker in Detroit could not just learn to code and work at Google like that. And so it was much less seamless. And I think what we're dealing with now will be even more of a disruption, that the people who are being disrupted out of AI are going to have a much more difficult time historically to move into where the economy is going next. So the idea that an industry is disrupted and you need to go figure out something else to do, I think has gotten progressively harder over the last 150 years.
And when we moved from machines to technology, it was a significant leap also for the user and for the customer and as well as for the employee. So that
fascinating, but we won't listen to the whole thing. If we aren't really sure like how humans, if we can't beat AI at what AI is good at, what can we beat AI at, right? Being human. I feel like that's the best thing that we can beat them at. And we do need to kind of work on those skills, I think. This might be useful if you're job searching. LinkedIn produced a report, Skills on the Rise in 2025. If you go there, they basically said, about by country, which new skills are emerging on LinkedIn profiles that people are adding. And I think in the US, let's see if it says, I think it was AI related and something human related. Oh yeah, AI literacy was number 1. And then number 2 is conflict mitigation, which AI is not doing at all. And adaptability was 3rd. Adaptability on your LinkedIn resume, right? And then process optimization. And then innovative thinking, which again is not really an AI skill either. So but AI literacy is important. It's how to use the AI, not, oh, I'm good at what the AI does. It's, I know how to use the AI so that I can basically 10x my output. And then the other 4 are basically human skills, and those are the things that you need to be good at. So I touched on this a little bit before too, but our education system again is going to have to be reimagined, because we don't we don't teach the things that we need to have in like a new AI driven economy. So maybe, hopefully, in an ideal, it shifts from the memorization model to training mindfulness, critical thinking, more creativity, collaboration between students, ethics, how to be ethical, like studying more like philosophy and things like that. But also, I think someone here also mentioned, well, you're going to have to keep learning and you have to keep checking. Yes. So essentially, things are changing so rapidly all the time that you can't just say, oh, I got a high school diploma and a college degree and now I'm good. I can just do that task forever now. Like you can't do that. You won't be able to survive. So you have to continue. It's going to develop into this continuous learning, be a lifelong student, essentially. So something that might develop is maybe more subscription-based models for skill development in this type of world. I mean, we already have, apps that do that, but they're also, maybe they'll be reimagined where AI is also helping with that skill development because you now have an AI tutor along with this. So I've used that personally. I created like a GPT that was specifically around creating like a syllabus for me based on, hey, I want to learn this skill. I want to get better at this. Can you create me like a 10-week program to learn this, and it's not super effective yet for me because it doesn't, you have to remember to go back to it and everything. But they're going to come out with, in the near future, they're going to come out with agents that are basically like in your pocket. You could just have like a tutor for any subject you want whenever you need it. And then I think because we're going to be having to learn more, but also value the humanness, that maybe there's a possibility of creating learning communities like this one, where you're exchanging ideas and you're not working in a silo. You're like working with other people to say, oh, hey, I learned this, and what did you learn? And then you're also practicing your human skills by actually going out and talking to other humans about what you're learning. And then maybe we value micro credentials. So, instead of, hey, I got a degree in biology, I'm credentialed in prompt engineering, or I'm credentialed in nonviolent communication. Things like, skills that are going to be more highly valuable. McKinsey estimated current work activities automatable with existing technology is 40% of your work hours could be automated with AI, which is a lot. And I have trouble with these numbers, but the PricewaterhouseCoopers projected AI contribution to the global economy by 2030 to be over $15 trillion. I don't know, that's a number I can't even really comprehend. So it's interesting. Where I don't think that we really know how it's going to affect our economy or our society, but we do know that it's going to change. I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's kind of this economic paradox, right? So it promises unprecedented abundance, like what they were just talking about on that podcast. If you have an editor for $1 a day, that's abundance. While it's potentially concentrating wealth in fewer hands, it's, the possibility of this magnificent utopia of abundance, like in this picture down here, or a very difficult dystopia. We as humans have to decide which one we want that to be. So yeah, there are already experiments with universal basic income. I mean, not like we don't have that, but people like Sam Altman are definitely thinking about that, and he's not waiting for the government to do it, which I think is interesting, is an interesting idea as well. You know, he's not saying, oh, we're going to have the government provide this UBI. He's saying the companies, the owners of these AIs may provide this universal basic income, which I don't know, is intriguing. You know, rethinking capitalism and all that jazz. The reason I posted this is because it was like, oh, this combines basically what we were going to talk about today with Bitcoin, and I always love to you know, loop in Bitcoin to this, but it's interesting what happened in Spain. You know, the Bitcoin didn't work then either, but apparently cash wasn't really working either unless you actually had change, dollars, cents, lots of ones, lots of fives. But people were saying they couldn't even use cash because we were reliant on the cash registers to open to give them change for your $100 bills. So yeah, so you know, nothing is perfect if the internet goes down or the electricity goes down. So this was funny. What are you going to do with your Bitcoin when the power goes out? No, I'm in Bitcoin to help create a society where no one ever worries about the power going out. This is basically an abundant mindset, which kind of goes along with AI. Is you're thinking about, well, how can AI actually in the very near future create, you know, it's going to help us develop abundant energy, because it's going to know how to do that better than we will. You know, they're saying it's going to solve climate change. It's going to solve, you know, tornadoes. And a really good presentation or talk that I recommend you watch is Sam Altman was interviewed at TED 2025 a couple weeks ago. And it was I only watched clips of it, but it was a lot about, you know, the power, the ethics, you know, because Sam Altman has a lot of power over kind of where this goes. So that was a really fascinating conversation, and I definitely want to go back and watch it as well. But they hit a lot on the ethics and the concerns that people have with AI as well. I don't necessarily think that people think that companies will care. It's mostly Sam Altman pushing it from what I've heard, and the people that he's working with on the world.org project. Sam Altman seems pretty committed to that mission, and his company is like the fastest growing company in the world. I could completely misunderstand what Sam Altman's objectives are as well. So, you know, don't take my word for it. I mean, if this is something that interests you, definitely look at world.org, look into that, his program or what he's doing, and maybe you can teach us more about that. And then watch his interview from TED, because it's specific. The interviewer was not being easy on him with regards to how much power he has and how he's going to use that. So definitely interesting. Yeah, so this tweet came out this week, and it was just like, I'm sorry, what? So you say, if you're not skill maxing with O3, with ChatGPT version 03, model 03, a minimum of 3 hours every day, NGMI, which is now apparently short for not gonna make it. You know, I don't know. Maybe he's just talking to developers. I don't know, but like, you know, but also if you're trying to be in the workforce, this might be accurate. It's probably pretty accurate, because you're essentially going back to school again. And when you were in college, you studied more than 3 hours a day. So, you know, I don't necessarily disagree with it if you are trying to be competitive in the workplace. Or in life at this point. So yes, there are some. I also put together like a list these were some of my ideas and some of the things that like I've already done. But learning AI is important, but not just reading about it, not just taking like a class. You can't just read OpenAI's, how to use ChatGPT and think that you've got it. This is something that you kind of have to actively experiment with, and not just ChatGPT. There are lots of AI tools, and you need to figure out which ones are going to, help you, augment you in the work that you do, because it's going to be a mandatory skill in the very soon future. Another one I think that is important is developing the question asking skills, because a lot of the benefit from AI comes from asking the right questions to AI. So somehow practicing formulating thoughtful questions that matter, and then documenting which prompts and which questions really work the best for the tasks that you do, for the work that you're doing, and how you can collaborate with it. Another one that Mogadot really, in his talk, he also harps on is that essentially the truth as we know it is also over. I've personally already experienced this a couple of times, seeing certain like talks on YouTube and thinking that it was like the real person, and then realizing that was an AI that recreated. I think it was a Michael Saylor video of Michael Saylor speaking on stage, but he was saying really strange things on top of a video of him giving a presentation on stage, which if you're not paying attention, you would have thought, oh, that's Michael Saylor speaking, and that's what he's saying. That's just one example, but there's going to be a lot more of that. So it's really important to strengthen your truth-finding abilities. Really be on the lookout for something that doesn't seem true, doesn't seem real, seems like, I don't know, this seems a little off. I don't know. My prediction is, as humans, we're going to start to develop like AI bullshit detectors pretty quickly. We don't have that skill yet because we don't have enough experience. We don't have enough experience with both examples, right? We're used to everything that we see coming from a real human, and so we kind of still take that for granted. But I think as we see more AI generated, we may start to get a little bit of a bullshit filter on that kind of thing. But trust your intuition for sure. And then the other really important one is your human network. I think more than ever, your human connections, your community, your family, your friends, the people that you trust is going to be extremely valuable, because it's one of the things that will be very scarce in an abundant world. So joining meetups, going to joining professional communities, or skill swapping, those are all really, really valuable things, even when it kind of feels like it's, not fun. I mean, I don't know. I went to a couple of AI related meetups a couple of months ago, and we were just sharing how we're using AI, and I joined a meetup group around a couple of, hobbies that I had, just to, start meeting, to practice, sharing and collaborating with other humans. I think that's super important. And making time to connect with your loved ones like this is also very important. But yeah, I think that that's going to be more valuable in the future. And so it's something that I'm personally putting a lot of time and energy into, even when it feels like you're not really doing anything. Like Tuesday night, I went to some dinner with a bunch of strangers in my town, because I was like, well, you know, I don't know. I don't have high hopes for this dinner, but you know, you never know. And you got to put yourself out there and connect with your community, and, you know, who knows, you know? So yeah, I think that's important. And don't underestimate your judgment as a human as well. We have to be the ones to say, you know, if AI is going the wrong way, to say, I don't think we should be using it that way, you know? Excuse me. Yeah, and then Raoul Paul, one of my mentors, he suggests investing in yourself and your continuous skill development, as well as building financial resilience. He's an ex investment banker who has basically dedicated his life now to preparing the world, to preparing everybody for this shift. And he will say, he did a podcast with Diary of a CEO a couple months ago as well, where he basically said, you know, you have 5 years. You have 5 years to prepare yourself for this shit. So don't fuck up your future. And the way that he says you can unfuck your future is by building financial resilience and investing in yourself. Okay, so these are some of my ideas. I would like to hear when I'm finished, the next slide is my last one, what ideas you have. But a couple of the ones that I liked was organizing a skill swap with friends or colleagues. So like if you are in a workplace, then you might do a little skill swap with people at work to see what they're using. Subscribe to an AI newsletter or podcast. Those have been really amazing sources of, you know, information for me, and exposes me to new tools. You could also try teaching AI literacy to somebody who maybe, you know, underserved communities, but like basically, you know, people who maybe this doesn't come as naturally to, you know, like I might have to teach some of my friends who are Luddites, you know, but also, you know, elderly people or people who just, you know, they can't even keep up with the technology of the last 20 years, you know, that kind of thing. And then the AI stuff, the AI ethics stuff, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of new groups, maybe Reddit boards, or maybe local meetups, or I don't know, some communities and groups where you could actually join to talk about AI ethics and really start to understand the nuance of that and help teach other people, that kind of thing. And then as an example, as I was doing research for this stuff, I was using Notebook LM for part of that, putting all like the sources that I found into Notebook LM. And then I saw that they had this feature. You put all of your resources in and it just creates a podcast for you. But it's like a 16-minute podcast that basically is this entire presentation, but in podcast form. It's pretty good. You know, it definitely sounds AI generated because, you know, so it kind of irritates me a little bit. But or at least it's going to get good, I'm sure. There's a bunch of ripoffs or like imitators. There's a couple imitators that are, because there isn't a Notebook LM Google app right now, there's a couple of others, if you try to search on your phone right now, that are trying to be that. Yeah. AI Notebook is really helpful though. I do use that one it's mostly for students who like want to record their lectures, and then it creates lecture notes for them like instantly. Sounds kind of cool for students. All right. We're at the end. So just to summarize, the world is changing gradually, then suddenly. By 2030, we have like 4.5 years. I mean, this is obviously an estimate. Everything's going to be different. It could be earlier than that. It could be in 2 years. It could be in 6 years. I mean, we don't know. But we need to develop adaptability and resilience. And we need to master the AI tools, because AI won't take your job, but someone who understands it, they definitely will. Learn to use AI like your survival depends on it, because it may. And become a lifelong curious learner. And then 3, cultivate your human advantage. Invest in your emotional intelligence, in your communication skills, and start to develop. I mean, we all have critical thinking skills, but challenge yourself to think critically and not just, we hear a lot of stuff, we read a lot of stuff, and don't just take it for granted. Like, oh, do I believe that? Is that true? 4, build digital security. This is important financially because there's a lot of AI scams out there. They're getting extremely elaborate. You need to make sure that all of your accounts are secure. You have good password protection. You're using either 2-factor authentication or passkeys. And maybe we need to have a session on setting that up, but I recommend you try to do that. Pretty much on any account that you would not want hacked into, make sure that that's set up. There's very elaborate scams, people, breaking into bank accounts and such, because you can now make somebody's voice, and then you could call somebody on the phone pretending to be your spouse, saying, hey honey, I'm at the bank and I couldn't remember my debit PIN code or something, oh yeah, okay, it's this. Hang up. And you don't know. So just definitely have everything secure and trust, but verify that this person actually is who they say they are. I heard somebody say, for your family and for your family, like maybe develop like some sort of code or something that only the two of you know, so that you can verify that it is actually them, that somebody hasn't taken over their phone, taken over their accounts, called you pretending to be them, so that you could say like, hey, where is that mole on my body or something, or like something that only they would know, or like a secret code word or something, just to be sure. And then 5, strengthen your community bonds. Oh, I just wanted to say, for number 4, for this digital security, this is important, because the number one thing that rich people say about money is just never lose money. Okay, and this is a very easy way which you could lose a lot of money overnight. And so don't lose money. 5, strengthen your community bonds. Human connection is going to be currency. Trust is currency, because it's going to be scarce. And having a community, people to fall back on, strong connections, is going to actually protect you from economic uncertainty. If you lose your job, perchance, if you have something to fall back on, you're not going to be as impacted as somebody who has no social network. And then the last one, secure your financial future. So unfuck your future, secure your financials for tomorrow, acquire scarce assets like Bitcoin, because who knows what will be scarce in the future. Position yourself ahead of these economic disruptions. That is all, my friends.